History, episode 136, Wednesday night. Gary, what's going on?
We're wild on Chicago tonight.
It's the place to be right now.
Hmm. If you're a ghoul,
Yeah, if you're deep state,
hmm.
the DNC here.
But we apologize for the repetition there.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about first? Actually, I want to talk about last week's episode
Oh,
because we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about today.
hmm.
But I love the aside to Kill a Mockingbird. It just felt like an episode that you could listen to a year from now and it'll still hold up.
Hmm.
I don't know how many of our episodes have become like that just due to all the current events we do,
Yeah.
but it was a good break.
It's a nice departure.
Yeah.
It
From
got
the
people talking too, in terms of commentary and people personally coming up to me at various venues and responding. I have yet to find a person who said the book was meh, as we did, and I've yet to I at least I have people considering that it was a psyop as you concluded, and I'm on that side by this point. Uh, it's it's not too hard to fathom cui bono who benefited from that type of a psyop of designating the South as in need of redemption. That's a very that's a very nationalistic and well, it's a theme and a trope that's very consistent throughout American history and dispositions of Northerners, as well as I don't know if anyone ever called Harper Lee a scallywag or someone like that as a Southerner who supported Northern causes, but I'd be fascinated again, and I haven't done any legwork or research in this regard, but what are Southern takes? Sort of a traditional, someone who loves Southern culture and history, and what's their take both then and now to Kill a Mockingbird, not just the text but the reception of it, as it has a status that might be described as American scripture.
That's a good way of putting it.
How did it attain that height? I
We don't have to talk about that today.
No.
We've got a better story. But first, I think we should talk about Blase.
Blase. It's Blase Supich.
Where was he?
He
Wait,
was
let
at
me
the
let me guess. Let me guess. Some church on the streets inspiring millions of people or in the city of Chicago, really evangelizing people out there and dealing with all the spiritual problems that this city has to deal with. Not getting too involved in politics because he's above that.
right. No, he went to the Wiccan gathering, and rather than bringing holy water and salt and the tools of exorcism, he was an invited guest, and he was charged with, and with, it seemed, great energy. For him, who knows, because he doesn't have energy about really anything, but certainly not our Lord and defending the church and our faith. But he delivered the invocation at the Democratic National Convention. By the way, a political party that has firm and repeated platform positions that are inimical to the basic teaching of the Catholic Church, including, by the way, if you recall, last year, I believe it was last year, they officially removed any reference to God in their platform. So here's, I, I don't get as to why Democrats felt compelled to invite him for the invocation, but it seems to me that when you are able to convert, there's a tendency to then be prideful of and celebrate the inversion. So It had to be something for all these ghouls and demoniacs to see how cucked a cardinal of the Catholic Church had become under their auspices, under their control. So let's have them give the invocation, because they're in their shrine. They're going to have their faux priest get up and deliver an invocation to do what? Well, look, maybe we should look at the entirety of the text. It's not long, so shocker, no one's going to be surprised. There's no mention of Jesus by a Catholic prelate. So, from August 19th, 2024, this is what Blase Supich said. We praise you, O God of all creation. Quicken in us, God, I hate that. Quicken in us a resolve to protect your handiwork. You are the source of every blessing that graces our lives and our nation. We pray that you help us to truly understand and answer the sacred call of citizenship. I'm already vomiting. The sacred call to citizenship. We are a nation. Here we go with the whole national identity myth, right? We are a nation composed of every people and culture, united not by ties of blood, but by the profound aspirations of life, freedom, justice, and unbound hope. These aspirations are why our forebears saw America as a beacon of hope. And with your steady guidance, Lord, may we remain so today. In every generation, we are called to renew these aspirations, to reweave the fabric of America. I don't know if I can go on. I'm feeling a literal nausea. It's not figurative. I'm sick to my stomach already. We do so. It's not just the propositional nation myth that he keeps reporting, but we do so when we live out the virtues that dwell in our hearts, but also when we confront our failures to root out ongoing injustices in our national life, especially those created by moral blindness and fear of the other. So, goodbye subsidiarity. This all has to be served at and solved at the national level. We pray for peace, especially for people suffering the senselessness of war. But as we pray, we must also act, for building up the common good takes work. It takes love. And so we pray, may our nation become more fully a builder of peace in our wounded world, with the courage to imagine and pursue a loving future together. And may we as individual Americans become more fully the instruments of God's peace. Oh, there's finally a God reference. I know you mentioned Lord before. Guide us, Lord, in taking up our responsibility to forge this new chapter of our nation's history. Let it be rooted in the recognition that for us, as for every generation, unity triumphing over division is what advances human dignity and liberty. Well, that's quite a proposition. Let it be propelled by the women and men, of course, women have to come first, elected to serve in public life, who know that service is the mark of true leadership. And let this new chapter of our nation's history be filled with overwhelming hope, a hope that refuses to narrow our national vision, but rather, as Pope Francis has said, because this is Francis Church, to dream dreams and see visions of what by your grace our world can become. We ask all this, trusting in your ever-provident care for us. Amen. And then he turned into a bat and flittered out of the United Center. I love this. There's so much fluff and nonsense and inherent contradiction within all of that, but there's all this Hegelian So if people aren't familiar with Hegel and this whole idea of Geist and the trajectory of history nonsense, that there's this mystical force not identified as God at all, but kind of that propels us forward, an advancement of human nature and the human person and populations. And all of that language is very Hegelian. He wouldn't know because he was at the bottom of his seminary class over and over again. And like John McCain, I equate Blaise Supich to John McCain. He is the analogous John McCain within the church. You know, John McCain graduated at the bottom of his Annapolis class in the U.S. Naval Academy, which means, of course, that the only reason he got through was because his father was an admiral. And then and like Trump said, remember what he said in
I remember.
the campaign in 2016? I prefer my heroes not to get shot down, not to be captured. That was so great. And everybody said it spelled ruination for his campaign. But just propelled him forward because everybody with any sanity hates John McCain. So yeah, this all of these notions that are just vague at all references, if there are at all references to the divine, it just strikes me as someone who, as a successor, a supposed successor of the apostles, is ashamed and fearful of Catholicism. Or no, I'm sorry, he's ashamed. Yes, he's ashamed and fearful of the reaction people have to Catholicism. So when I think it was the Beritus Twitter feed or Twitter account posted, or was it Memento Mori? I think they are both associated with each other. Said that we used to have bishops that were willing to die by being fed to wild beasts, and all the while praying for their captors. We have an apostle Bartholomew who was flayed to death after witnessing the truth of Jesus' life, teaching, death, and resurrection. And now we have bishops that are so embarrassed as to not even mention Jesus, and also notice that he either disposed of, covered up, or shielded his pectoral cross, his episcopal pectoral cross. He wasn't wearing it, or he was wearing it and it was covered up. So if the, as Ignatius of Antioch said, the church is where your bishop is, right? If we had this is just reminiscent of, the bishop in this case, I think pseudo bishop of Chicago, the Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago, he's like the classrooms at Georgetown when Obama came through. You remember that story? Shortly
No,
after Obama was elected in 2008, he gave a speech at at Georgetown, and before he arrived, either someone in his campaign initiated it, or someone at Georgetown went and removed all the crucifixes from the classrooms and anything that he would have seen, which in a way is appropriate because how is the guy as a demoniac going to speak when a crucifix is there? So they really wanted to make sure that the great orator Barack Obama, who even opponents say is like the reincarnation of Demosthenes, oh, whatever, um, that he's not going to be able to deliver his mendacious addresses while the sign of human redemption and life and all truth, goodness, and beauty is referenced in a sacramental form. No way. But isn't it interesting that Supich, he gets invited to the EDC and he acts just like those Georgetown administrators. Oh, got to cover that up. That's not wanted here. One should note that most likely concurrent with his speech, Planned Parenthood has a mobile abortion and vasectomy unit, and they're providing free vasectomies and abortion. So at the same time, simultaneous with the supposed cardinal archbishop successor of the apostles of one of the largest sees in the world, delivering a speech to this collection of the possessed and the truly evil, a baby was probably dying in a van, sponsored and promoted and celebrated by everyone in attendance. If that's not Moloch and Baal and Mephistopheles doing their dark magic and convincing a lot of people who are much more in favor of worshiping those demons than ascribing to any sort of truth, goodness, and beauty, that's them. That's their work. That's their handiwork. What's your reaction to Blase?
A lot of word salad. There's just a whole
Mine
lot
or
of
his?
no. His. It's just more of the what's the word we use? Weaponized
Ambiguity?
ambiguity. Just more weaponized ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Why does Blaise Supich? I thought the Catholics don't really like the Democrats. Why is Blaise Supich there now? If you're older and more naive.
I don't. You'd have to be so naive as to think you're. Someone would have to conclude that your head's in cement and then buried in sand.
I think you might be surprised at some of the older voting population.
Yeah. Well, their lack of information and their lack of understanding of the world and how it's functioning or not functioning today is a major indictment against democracy and majority rule.
Yeah, I didn't. Maybe it was a mistake talking about this.
Why is that?
It just makes me angry.
And it should. It should.
Yeah,
These are not uh, what I am reminded of, the very saintly and authentically saintly in my mind, although he wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, Cardinal Francis George predicted that during his own stay as Archbishop and Cardinal of Chicago that his successor would go to jail and his successor would be killed. Blaise Supich is not going to see the inside of a jail cell, right? So he's not going to prison. It makes me conclude that this is a kind of nod. I don't think Cardinal George is wrong. I just don't think this man is an authentic Catholic, and therefore he can't be an actual bishop, and so he's not his true successor.
yeah.
It's an indicator of that.
You said a line on the podcast once that I've used a couple times that we're really living in the wolves in sheep's clothing era right now.
Right. The white pill to that, however, is that you've seen those memes where Jesus is uh looking at like the kind of woke or not the awakened guy, not the woke guy, but the awakened guy. And he says something along the lines of, listen, could I have given you any weaker, more feckless, more effeminate, uh, ill-equipped, dumber enemies to vanquish? And the guy kind of responds, "No, I guess not, Lord. I feel better now," or something along those lines. That's the thing. They are so outside the construct and paradigm of truth and beauty and goodness and the transcendentals that are so much in the essence of God's providence and his activity and grace within our lives that their effect is negligible, right? It's very much along the lines of what Jesus says when he describes himself in the synoptics, particular about how he's the good shepherd. I know mine and mine know me, right? So any any ape church official like Blaise Supich who professes that one, he has the authority of the apostles, which is just, as I previously mentioned and we were discussing just earlier, absurd to think he's on the same level as someone like Polycarp or Matthew and James and John and Peter. Who are we kidding here? Or any think of Athanasius or Augustine. I mean, and Blaise Supich. I what that's something that is kind of interesting to me. Like, why wouldn't you, if the first thing I would feel if God called me to the episcopacy is just the enormous weight of that. How absolutely unworthy I would be to be or take on the job and office of John the Evangelist, of Saint Simon the Zealot, of Matthew, not to mention all the holy successors who have come down to us through the ages. I mean, Albert the Great was a bishop. Oh, I'm going to try. I have to imitate Albert the Great. I look in the mirror and go, come on, Lord, what are you doing with me? Right. And then I can't imagine, how could you be Blaise Supich or Cardinal Tobin or Cardinal Law or, oh, God forbid, some of these worthless sinners like McCarrick as a cardinal, and or Cardinal Marx. We have a Cardinal Marx. I mean, talk about the devil having a laugh, right? In Munich, or Daniels in Belgium. I mean, how could you be and look in the mirror and say, I'm supposed to be a successor of the apostles? Me, Godfrey Daniels, me, Rembert Weekland, me, Robert McElroy. I mean, what I think that allows for us is we who hear Christ's voice, we know these frauds. We know. We don't listen to their voices. We listen to Christ. And they're out there doing the best to scatter and devour the flock. But their impact is going to be negligible. They're going to die. And then we'll look back on this and say, ooh, isn't that wild that there was this allowance, this evil allowance, unfortunately. I mean, that's a white pill, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Not good in our proximate times, but in the future,
Yeah.
there's no hope. He's talking about all these ephemeral fluff nonsense references to hope. Our hope as Catholics is that the day's going to dawn when, and frankly, like Delingpole says all the time, right? In the end, we know who wins.
Right. The sacred right to citizenship line is just
Who? Yeah. Well, and
vomit.
yeah, and I was listening to a part of the problem episode with Dave, and he just recorded today, so I was reading or listening almost in real time, and he talked about Van Jones's reaction to Obama's speech last night, and he was talking about how Van Jones is like, I feel holy again. I, something was missing in my life. I was lost and now I've been found because he listened to Big Mike and Barack speak a bunch of nonsense and fluff that could have been written by Blaise Supich. I know that Blaise Supich didn't write this. I doubt Obama's the I doubt very highly the Obamas wrote their vacuous speeches that went nowhere, right? It's all and it's just what's the allure? The the allure is in the lie. And I love that how they used to remember when they had the Trump January 6th committee and they Liz Cheney kept calling the the whole idea of Trump losing or that Trump didn't really lose the election, he won the election, the big lie. Again, all the inversion that's going on there. Oh, there is I've only watched snippets of this cabal unfolding. This parade of the possessed unfolding just miles away from where we are now, and just a few miles. And I can't tell you, you could there is no truth in any. You could just parse out all of the different sentences, statements, and phrases. There's no truth. Where's truth? There's no reference to it. There, there's certainly no beauty in it. It's all these references to some communal destination that hasn't been reached yet, which, by the way, is very, very Marxist. So, yeah, Marxist had, and this is from Yuri Schleskin's book, The House of Government, which is a fantastic philosophical, historical treatment of early communism as it rose up during and after the Bolshevik Revolution in the Soviet Union. And if you read Sverdlov and Lenin and Trotsky, all the seminal figures of the revolution, they all talk about this end goal day where everything's going to be achieved. A critic of that might say, well, they're getting that from Christianity. Fine, but they're borrowing it as this day of utter redemption and justice dawning, but the day never arrives. So when the economy is ground to a halt, right? Lenin has to say, well, we have to put off the arrival of the perfect day because of these obstinate kulaks and people that don't want to starve to death through collectivization. So we'll inject some capitalism through the new economic plan and programs. And that might delay the arrival of the day, but eventually that's our hope we'll get there with the abolishment of all private property and the subjugation of all peoples and the elimination of their basic human liberties under the perfect Soviet state. Never arrives. So you just got to keep pushing on, pushing on.
Let's get to our next story.
Mm-hmm.
This one's a little lighter. Cook County woman gets 9 years in prison for stealing $1.5 million in chicken wings from school district.
She's the wing burglar.
A Dalton woman pleaded guilty to stealing more than $1.5 million of food, primarily chicken wings, from a South suburban school district.
Now we should note that Dalton is also the location of that famous Mayor Tiffany Holden, I think her name is, maybe, who's been stealing funds left and right, going on lavish trips, spending sprees. Maybe she learned a thing or two from the wing burglar.
Vera Liddell, 68, was sentenced to 9 years in prison during a hearing on Friday. At the time of the crime, Liddell was working as the director of food services for Harvey School District 152. Between July 2020 and February 2022, prosecutors said Liddell placed hundreds of unauthorized orders for food items, including 11,000 cases of chicken wings, through the school district's main supplier, Gordon Food Service. The orders were placed separately from the district's legitimate orders, prosecutors said. Quote, the massive fraud began at the height of COVID during a time when students were not allowed to be physically present in school. Even though the children were learning remotely, The school district continued to provide meals for the students that their families could pick up, prosecutors said when the charges were filed. Believing the orders were genuine, Gordon Food Service billed Harvey School District 152, which then paid for the food items, according to court records. Liddell would then allegedly use one of the school district's cargo vans to pick up and transport the stolen food.
She had absolutely no skin in the game at all.
Quote, the food was never brought to the school or provided to the students, prosecutor said.
Get out.
A routine mid-year audit conducted by the district's business manager in January 2022 showed the food service department had exceeded its annual budget by over $300,000, despite only being halfway through the school year, prosecutors said. Prosecutors said Liddell was the only person responsible for placing orders on behalf of the district. This is the best part of it all, I think. Upon closer review, she discovered individual invoices signed by Liddell for massive quantities of chicken wings, an item that was never served to students because they contain bones, the proffer said.
That's so amazing. Like, why wouldn't she just think about it. Maybe she would have gotten away with it if it was chicken fingers or nuggets.
I don't
What do you
know.
think?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I would love to be wherever this guy was at in January 2022. The poor district business manager.
Yeah.
Employees of Gordon Food Service said they were all familiar with Liddell, quote, due to the massive amount of chicken wings she would purchase. And surveillance video of the facility showed she would often arrive prior to the store opening to pick up the orders. She was charged with felony theft, continuing a financial crime enterprise, and forgery in January 2023.
There you go. The wing burglar. Now that is some efficient government at work, huh? Especially in education.
It's disgusting, especially during COVID.
It took them almost 2 years to figure it out.
Right.
Years. Grand larceny. Oh, shit. This woman's ordering millions of dollars of chicken wings, hundreds of thousands of dollars of chicken wings. We don't even serve chicken wings. That's awesome. The question of what they didn't talk about was they didn't say where she took. I think she sold them to restaurants, right? She sold the wings to restaurants.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that
theories.
I read somewhere else that's what she was doing. It's quite the scam. Hey, zero overhead. The school district's even paying for the fan and the gas to transport the wings. That's awesome.
That's so Chicago. You know, when out of towners ask me about Chicago and they don't know anything about Chicago, and normally they say something like, oh, am I going to get shot if I go there?
Right.
I always tell them. And then this always leads to like a deeper conversation because I've noticed that it's super easy to say a town's violent, but it's a little harder to say it's corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say a lot of people think Chicago is a violent city, and the numbers say it probably is, but
it bears that
depending on where you're at, your life's probably not in danger where you're going. But Chicago's a very corrupt city.
Oh,
it's a very filthy city. And then you get into teachers unions and COVID smuggling and chicken wings. And all of a sudden, you get to find out a little bit about where they're at politically, because anyone could just be like, oh, it's so violent.
Yeah, add around 60,000 migrants and then contracts from the city in the hundreds of millions of dollars range, even upwards of $1 billion by this point, I think. And surprise, all the cronies and political connections of the mayor, they're the ones who get the contracts for the migrants to live in their their real estate, hotels, clubs, whatever. So they're making a fortune.
Speaking of the DNC, did you hear about how much harder it is to get into the DNC than it is to get into the actual country?
Oh yeah, they built the walls and everything like that. Jimmy Dore is in the city last night. He was in the Gold Coast, and they're building up like walls along the sidewalks.
Yeah, the expressways got cops. The Kennedys got cops everywhere.
What is that about?
What do you mean? What's it about?
Why do they need them? That's nowhere near the United Center,
Things get weird.
I guess.
They know things get weird.
Yeah. It might also just be
Theater,
a
Shakespeare,
scam. It's just a scam.
right?
All of a sudden, I wonder if you could go back and find once Chicago was awarded as the site by the Democratic National Committee to be the location for the DNC this year. I wish you could go. I wonder if you could go back and see who scooped up contracts from the city for barricades, right? Or mace, or you name it, body armor for the cops, right? It's all just crooked shit. It smells to high heaven.
You want to get to the people's favorite segment? A place
Yes.
not too far from Chicago.
Yeah, not at all.
Here it is.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Should we go to your gay suburb now?
The people segment. Meanwhile, in Oak Park. Delegates from Republic of Georgia come to Oak Park.
Why? Why Oak Park? Georgia's a beautiful country. It is very, very economically free enterprise. I mean, Georgia was the one country where Ben Powell went during Socialism Sucks, and he's like, this is where one could be an entrepreneur in this Caucasus Mountain former Soviet republic. So now they're gonna come to Oak Park.
Oak Park
Those-
couple houses for foreign visitors and shows them local landmarks. Oak Park residents Gloria and Bruce Cox did not need a visa or have to suffer jet lag to learn firsthand about the culture of the Republic of Georgia. Instead, they participated in Open World, a professional exchange program dedicated to creating authentic communication and immersive cultural experiences. As part of the program, a delegation of 5 civil and legal activists from Georgia, a former Soviet republic, visited Illinois August 9th through 17th. The program was aimed at providing activists with tools to advance democracy and freedom in Georgia. I don't think they're going to find that in Oak Park. One of the delegates.
Then why send them to Oak Park?
One of the delegates, Nadi Giovanni, stayed with the Coxes in Oak Park. Giovanni is a lawyer who worked for the Human Rights Department of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Georgia for many years, where she focused on hate crimes, bias-motivated crimes, and gender-based violence.
Crap. And she also gets her side job and side hustle is for the CIA.
She now works at the NGO Rule of Law Center, where she continues to specialize in the protection of human rights. The Oak Park couple also hosted the group's facilitator, Anna Jobava, who works as the civil society organization's advisor at the USAID Rule of Law program.
Okay, this is all just these are all just people tied in with the CIA who are going to lead the next color revolution in Georgia.
Quote, "We have participated with this program several times in the past," said Bruce Cox. "We've hosted people starting back about 6 years ago."
So they found the 4 people in Georgia that are willing to come to Oak Park and would feel right at home.
Administered by the Congressional Office for International Leadership, the Open World program brings emerging leaders from partner countries to the United States for 10 days of intensive exchange with professional counterparts. During the program, delegates stay with host families, giving them an intimate view of American life. Cox said he and his wife were first introduced to Open World by members of their church. Since then, the couple has welcomed into their homes delegates from Germany, Uzbekistan, Russia, Colombia, and now Georgia. Quote, you get to host a wide variety of different people, like social workers, lawyers, and scientists from a variety of different countries, he said. Activists for the visiting delegates in Illinois were coordinated by the Council of International Programs, Chicago, CIPC, a nonprofit international exchange program. George Palamadam, how do you say his last name? Palamadam. George Palamadam, executive director of CIPC, said the delegates met with an assortment of groups, including the American Civil Liberties Union, Arise Chicago, the Better Government Association, the Beverly Area Planning Association, the Center for Conflict Resolution, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Court, the Legal Aid Society, the Metropolitan Planning Council, Mikvah Challenge, and the Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. The group also met with U.S. Representative Danny Davis. Oh my gosh.
And they changed his diaper.
This is a 9-day trip.
Well, that sounds like, can you imagine how excited they must have been to meet all of those?
Were they just rotating all these groups? Jeez.
Can you imagine? These poor Georges like, when can we go to Six Flags? Is roller coaster? No roller coaster at AIPAC meeting? Danny Davis? No Tilt-A-Whirl?
Quote, they're invested in learning about best practices here, Palamadam said. It's a comprehensive program and there is no time to waste, I'll say. According to Palamadam, the CIPC coordinates with several groups of visiting delegates each year from a range of different counties and professional backgrounds. While last week's group from Georgia consisted of civic and legal activists, a group from Estonia who visited Illinois in June was comprised of professionals from the environmental sustainability sector.
Oak Park. We're spreading communism everywhere.
Quote, what they all have in common is that they are leaders or emerging leaders, he said. When delegates come to Illinois, the CIPC arranges for them to stay with host families rather than at hotels. Quote, doing this provides Americans an opportunity to build relationships across cultures and national boundaries without leaving their living room, Palamadam said.
And to be face-to-face with other World Economic Program future leaders.
Gloria Cox agreed with that sentiment. Quote, we like to travel a lot, and this is a cool way to explore another culture without having to get a passport and get on a plane, she said. It's a fun and easy thing to do. Cox said their guests from Georgia visited the Hemingway Home and Museum, the Oak Park Farmers Market, and the Frank Lloyd Wright Home and Studio. They also joined us for
no fucking roller coasters.
Quote, they also joined us for a Sunday night dinner at a friend's house. So they had a chance to just kind of socialize and experience that aspect of life in the Oak Park River Forest area, she said. In particular, Cox enjoyed learning about the food and desserts one of the delegates, who is an avid baker, likes to make. Quote, we discussed a range of topics and issues and answered questions they had about life in America, she said. Since its inception in 1999, more than 31,000 current and future leaders from partner countries have participated in the Open World program. The program uses congressional leadership and people-to-people engagement to provide foreign visitors with a multi-level federal, state, and local introduction to accountable governance and American life. To learn more, visit www.openworld.gov/.
Yeah.
I will not be visiting that website.
No, and it's good to the Georgian government is reading this article, taking down the names of the people they have to keep an eye on from now on. Put on the helicopter ride list. Because yeah, once there's a coup, it'll be that lady smiling from ear to ear.
Next one.
Okay.
Police data shows most Oak Park pedestrian stops are Black men. The report covering April to June also shows residents called police in most of those stops. From April to June 2024, Oak Park police stopped and questioned or searched 66 people, and the majority of them were Black men, police department data shows. Only 7 of these stops, called field or pedestrian stops, were initiated by police, according to Shatanya Johnson, Oak Park's police chief. The other 59 were calls from community members who called police to respond to a situation. That's pretty remarkable in itself.
What's remarkable?
This stat. So 66 people were stopped and questioned by police. And they're trying to build the narrative here, but only 7 of these stops were initiated by the police. So
are you implying that Oak Park residents are racist?
the other 59 were calls from community members who called police to respond to a situation.
There's a Black man walking outside, officer.
The stops from the second quarter of 2024 resulted in only 5 arrests, Johnson reported. The arrests were for 2 retail thefts, an assist to another agency, an active warrant, and a criminal trespass incident. The report showed that 89% of those stopped in April were Black individuals. That includes 20 Black men and 3 Black women. The other 11% of individuals stopped were white. According to the data, 10 of the Black men stopped in April were stopped because they were reported as a, quote, suspicious person or for, quote, suspicious activity. Other suspected crimes for individuals stopped that month include trespass, quote, suspicious auto, or are classified as other.
That would be great to get some of the, we could do that from Freedom of Information Act. Get recordings of the calls, right? Of the white person on Ridgeland Avenue who's looking out his window and going, officer, I'm sorry, I don't mean to bother anyone, but there's a man of rather shady pigment outside breaking into a car. How should I respond?
In May, 67% of individuals stopped were Black, according to police data. That includes 12 Black men. Hispanic women, 3 white men, and 2 white women were also stopped. Suspicious activity and suspicious person were common classifications for stops in May, too, along with trespass and, quote, other reasons. In June,
if it said, wait a second. The disparities would have been greater, but we all know Black people run faster.
In June, 15 Black men and 1 Black woman made up about 73% of pedestrian stops.
I mean, you watch the Olympics.
3 Hispanic men and 3 white men were also stopped. The rest were reported as an unknown race or ethnicity. Okay, they keep harping on this. Quote, suspicious person, quote, suspicious activity, and quote, suspicious incident were common reasons for stops in June, too. Johnson told the village board in July that the police are trying to move away from categorizing stops as a suspicious person or suspicious activity.
Well, how are they going to do that if the person's calling and saying there's suspicious activity going on? Are they going to take out the word?
Details of each stop can be found in the police's second quarter presentation. You can open that up.
Oh man.
We don't have to. We don't. Oh, they got a whole PowerPoint.
Oh man.
Oh, it's just. Oh.
Wow. It's a lot of detail.
Suspicious person observed with cart full of non-bagged meats with jewel stickers on them, unable to verify if the goods were stolen at the time.
That was the wing burglar.
Yeah, right.
Miss Liddell made her way to Oak Park.
This is a white female observed concealing baby formula in her bag. Items returned.
Oh.
This is 8 to 10 teens in the playground. These are white kids. Fireworks sounded. Juveniles fled the area. Subject was stopped. Parents contacted. Mother picked up juvie. Verbal warning given. Black male. Trespassing.
Hear the cops say, do you want to end up like those black kids walking around over there?
Trespassing. Warned by officer not to return to the location.
Oh, wow. But officer, he broke into my house. Don't come back here.
This is another black kid. Suspicious person observed on ring camera throwing a rock at a vehicle. Had
Okay.
pliers and screwdriver in his pocket, unable to locate an adult. RWOC with a stop card. I don't know what that means.
No.
Oh, these are good. Black male, other offender of aggravated assault with knife.
Whoa. Okay. Got serious there.
This is another trespassing warning. Retail theft offender arrested, cited, and released in station, notified not to return to 811 Madison Street.
What is that? 811 Madison.
Walgreens.
Yeah. All right, you stole a bunch of stuff. Just don't come back. Okay, officer.
Suspicious person observed on ring camera throwing rock at a vehicle, and we got to change up the terms.
Yeah.
I think that's a little suspicious, actually.
That's not even suspicious. Nothing suspicious about that.
So this is what they're talking about. These two different guys. Matched description of a person with a gun call, consented to a pat down, no weapon found. Oof. Oof.
Yeah.
Tough afternoon for those guys.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
That's brutal.
All right, how boomer is this that we're like reading the police blog?
I love it. They made it too easy for me. This is Meanwhile in Oak Park. We're reading the local newspaper. This is as boomer as it gets.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways. Okay, this is great. At the July 30th village board meeting, Johnson said there was a recent increase in newly hired officers training in the field, and warmer weather typically results in increased activity and more calls for service, she pointed out. When calls for service are made, the police respond no matter what. Many of the calls in the second quarter, she said, were around businesses in Oak Park. Often business owners or complainants want a warning issued before taking any further action, resulting in a lower number of arrests. Bad trajectory, question mark? Trustee Chibuke Inya asked how individuals are categorized in the data. Johnson said the categories such as listing someone as Hispanic is based on the officer's observation. Quote, we're taking a lot more steps that seem to be on a bad trajectory for Black and brown individuals in Oak Park, Inya said. I'm trying to figure out what is contributing to this.
Oh man, this guy.
And asked, I think it's a she, and asked what
She-
officers are taught to look for to initiate one of these stops. Johnson answered that only 7 of those stops in this quarter were officer initiated, while the rest were calls for service from the community. Trustee Corey Wesley asked Johnson about when individuals are stopped for, quote, matching a description that a caller might have made. He wanted to know if those descriptions are stored and can be compared to the description of the individual stopped. Johnson said that information can be accessed through political police databases. Johnson also said there are some pedestrian stops that could be handled through the alternative calls for service program moving forward. Any pedestrian stopped receives a stop card from the police, noting the interaction. The Oak Park Police Department had 79 officers as of July 30th. That's a lot.
That seems a lot.
Johnson said at the time, that's a lot.
Yeah.
The department started 2024 with about 83 officers, she said. The department is budgeted for 118 officers.
That's an army. It's a century.
Some officers resigned or retired, but others have since been hired. Johnson also told the village board that some officers who left have since asked to return to Oak Park. Quote, I do believe from discussion, they may have realized the grass isn't greener on the other side, she said. She said she expects an increase in police staffing overall in 2024. Oh, this is crazy.
Go ahead. It's an editorial.
Good for Oak Park Village trustees Corey Wesley and Shibuka and Yia in raising questions about the latest batch of racially disproportionate pedestrian stops made by Oak Park Police this past spring. And then they go through all the stats. A worthy question about why so many citizen calls specifically reference Black men. What bias and fear lead a citizen to report a quote suspicious person who is almost always Black? We need some collective self-assessment to answer that question.
Oh man, this is right up their alley. Collective
it.
guilt. They love it. That's it.
That's the segment.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
What would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, no, I'm gay? That's the podcast.
Charlie, I'm going to hazard a guess, albeit as radical as this might sound, of what led so many Oak Parkers to declare to the police when they called, referring to a suspicious individual and person doing some suspicious activity. And they happened to describe them as Black men. That's because there were a lot of Black men outside doing suspicious activities. That I'm just throwing it out there. I know that's Occam's razor-ish. I know it, but I'm just gonna go with it.
Throwing rocks at vehicles is suspicious activity now. Suspicious person. There's a suspicious person throwing a rock at a car.
Yes. And I'm trying to do my best, but how do I describe him? He would call me a honky. I don't know what I can call him. I love Oak Park.
83 officers budgeted for 118.
118. We'd have to do some research. I wonder what that and what's the police to citizen ratio compared to other like suburbs, you know?
That's a good question. I'm not looking that up right now.
Nah, we can do that later. So the wing burglar.
What do you think the Oak Park, Illinois racial breakdown is?
Oak Park, Illinois, you mean percentages?
Yeah.
I would say white is 65%, Hispanic 15, no, Hispanic 10, and what do we have left? 25 Black?
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Hispanic's not on here.
Okay.
White 63%. Black or African American 19.03%. Two or more races 9%. Asian 6%. Other race 2.49%.
Yeah. Pretty close.
Yeah. All right. I don't have much to say. I'm pretty tired from that episode.
That's good. That's good. Buy stuff from Tridentine Brewing. And yeah, keep sending me thoughts on our episodes. Whether it's literary criticism or it's talking about the wing burglar or anything else in between.
Yeah, we need some more involvement. We got viewers are way up, but they're silent viewers right now.
Passive. We want active, argumentative. Let's go. Come on.
Yeah.
We can do it. We can do it.
All right.
All right. Take care. Peace.
God bless it.